Yo, and welcome to the 152nd episode of League of Rage Pokemon Trading Card Game Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Clementi, aka Mellow_Magikarp. I'm joined today by 4 very special temporary guest hosts. We have three of them are joining us for the first time. One of them is now a repeat customer here. We're going to be talking about the NAIC meta that we are expecting at the time of recording. We are 5 days before day one, or approximately 5 days. Was that too soon?
No.
Okay, I apologize for
Too soon.
ruining that for everyone. We're 5 days in advance, so we're going to be talking about the decks that you should be teching for, considering testing against these last couple minutes as you attempt to win the international championship. We're going to have everyone introduce themselves first because there's a good chance you've heard of all 4 of these people, but I want to hear from everyone, your name, how long you've been playing, and some of your accomplishments that you think would be relevant. So we're going to start in my top left. That is Ian Robb. Ian, how long have you been playing, and what are some of your accomplishments?
Hello, my name's Ian. I've been playing since, 2007, so can't even count anymore how long that's been. I'm a 5-time regional champion, and most recently got top 16 at Los Angeles Regionals.
And then in the bottom left, we have, joining us for the first time as well, Michael Chen. Michael, how long have you been playing? What are some of your accomplishments?
Hi, I'm Michael. I've been playing for, this is basically my first season. I came from VGC.
That's sick.
So, thank you. So, this season, I guess my major accomplishments have been top 8 at Pittsburgh and then second at the Puerto Rico SPE.
And you're someone I just want to mention because other people might be in the same boat as me. We've seen a name that I was completely unfamiliar with on the championship points leaderboards for North America. That's you. You have almost 1,000 championship points in your first TCG season, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you saw Tord's draft yesterday, but he was very confused about who that was too.
So before we'll get to the other 2 in a second, did you know you were gonna go for this level of domination? Were you going for the round 1 invite, or were you just like, I'll do no? How did this come about?
I wasn't planning on even trying for Worlds until I got 3K from top 8ing Pittsburgh. So yeah, that kind of helped.
That's sick. And then in the bottom right, we have 2 people who are tag teaming because they just finished the SPE in Italy, and I'm now forgetting the name of the city. Apologize to all my Italian listeners. But we have joining us for the second time, we have Christian Fontenot. Christian, how long have you been playing? What are some of your accomplishments?
I've been playing for about 8.5 years now, since 2016. Most notably, I won the Stuttgart Regional Championships this season. And then recently, earlier today, I made top 16 at the Bologna SPE with Arctina.
And then in the same call, we have Emma Hagen. Emma, how long have you been playing? What are some of your accomplishments?
I've also been playing for 8 years, but a few months less. And notably, I lost a winning into top 8 of Stuttgart. So my best finishes are top 32 at Originals and top 64 at EUIC, but this is my first serious season as a competitor. Feeling really confident so far anyways.
So as you can hear, we have 4 very accomplished, very successful players this season who are going to give you their thoughts, because there's so many of them, you don't have to hear any of my thoughts, which is also a big plus, right? So we're going to go in the same order we just went in for this first question, same one we always do. What are the top 3 to 5 decks you are expecting for day 1 of NAIC? So what are those ones you think are going to be the highest percentages? And of course, if you think any of them are going to stand out in that, Lugia VSTAR of domination, that 25%, feel free to say it. But if you think they're all kind of going to be in the same percentage, you can mention that as well. Ian, what are you thinking of those top 3 to 5 decks for day 1?
So I think there's exactly 4 decks I expect to be over 10%, with them being Raging Bolt, Lugia, Gardevoir, and why is my name blanking? I'm doing Dragapult. I almost forgot what Dragapult was. Those are definitely going to be the top 4 decks. After that, I think that's a distant fifth to be something like Turbo Lost Zone or any other deck. It's really just the top 4. I think the guarantee will be decks that you have to face. Anything after that, it's like you could hit from 0 to 2 to 3 day 1, depending on if you get unlucky or lucky on the matchups.
Yeah, shout out to the Tournament of Doom is currently happening right now, and there is a quad Iron Thorns deck that hit 5 Lugias in a row.
Oh, I thought this was a safe space.
Michael, what about you? What are your top 3 to 5 decks you're expecting in day one?
I'm also going with Lugia, Bolt, and yeah, probably Dragapult. I'd put Dragapult first just because like there's so many variants of it,
Mhm.
so that's probably gonna like put a lot of numbers into it. Lugia and Bolt are just I guess easy to pick up, so that would also probably have a lot of people playing, make a lot of people play them.
And then Christian, you're next. What are your top 3 to 5? Are you gonna echo everyone else?
Yeah, you won't believe this. Raging Bolt, Lugia, Gardevoir, Dragapult, probably Lost Zone something, and like not even because it's particularly good. I don't think Lost Zone's bad, but I just think it's so clear that we have like a very clear top four right now.
Yeah.
I don't think all decks are equally good, but as far as play rate is concerned, I think it's very obvious that's going to be our top four. And then like a lot of people just stick to Lost Zone, which I think is totally fair. The deck doesn't really lose anything. Blood Moon's good, so we'll get into that later though. But yeah, those are definitely my top five, top four, and I don't know why it would end up being anything else.
Something, as you mentioned, Lost Zone, it's on my short list, right? And something I've talked about with when I mention that to people of like, there's a cult of Lost Zone who, no matter what, even if it keeps serving them badly, they are going to keep those comfies have never been unsleeved in their whole life. Emma, what about you? Top 3 to 5 decks?
Yeah, it's the top four. I think Raging Bolt and Lugia are going to be a bit above Dragapult and Guardi. Then I think number 5 will probably be Sard. Just the bottom 2 after top 6 is going to be up to anyone, but Sard is just still decent, and it has been the belief the entire format. So I don't see any reason people aren't considering.
That's valid, right? LA, it was 23, 24%, if I remember correctly. Bologna, it was, again, 20 something percent, right? It's it's hard to put that down a week or
I'm
two
not
in.
complaining.
Have you,
That's great for me.
do you want to explain why it's great, Ian, for people who aren't following the lore?
I think I just don't think Charizard's all that great anymore. Is all. I think that Dragapult really pushed out of the formats, and same with even Lugia is really bad matchup. So I don't really see a reason to play Charizard currently.
Does anyone want to defend Charizard? I'm seeing people shaking their head no.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's just a decent deck in general, but the matchups have never been fantastic for Sard. So I feel like it can push through regardless if the matchups are mediocre, but then again, it's just alright.
They don't good.
Yeah.
let's go ahead and jump into that top deck that we all mentioned. It recently won in Japan. It won in Japan in all 3 age divisions, too, if you weren't aware, right? So they had their national championship, so very large tournament, won juniors, won seniors, won masters. Also was another one in top 4 of masters, and of course, Lugia VSTAR. We all lived through a world where Lugia VSTAR was absolutely disgusting, unbeatable, etc., right? Are we back in that world? Is Lugia that good? Where does Lugia stand on the it's a good deck, it's a great deck, etc.? Michael, go ahead and start us off on this one. Where do you put Lugia in that spectrum of good, great, unbeatable? Where is it?
I think I'd definitely put it in like that great level. It gains so much just from legacy, from like the like prize map fixing, the like being able to use hands and Wellspring.
Mhm.
It's just so good for the deck. And then also like it also turns like certain matchups like Lost Box used to be extremely unfavored. Now it's probably like favored as long as you set up. Yeah.
I feel like those words, as long as you
Yes.
set up, are going to be said by everyone here.
Yeah. I guess to that point, like you also have Carmine to I guess it helps you a bit, maybe not a ton, because you're also losing out on like consistency cards because of the legacy and the attackers. But overall, I think it's definitely strong as long as you set up.
Christian, are you going to echo the deck is great now?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I have mixed opinions on Lugia because I think the deck is undeniably very powerful. Um, as long as you set up. But I do think it's a lot more counterable than we've seen Lugia be in the past. Enhanced Hammer is the big one. Like like one Enhanced Hammer in and of itself theoretically doesn't do that much against Lugia. It's namely that you get to E-hammer the Legacy Energy in a lot of important matchups. Namely, the matchups that are like really scared of hands, right? Like Gardevoir, for example, you can E-hammer away a Legacy Energy and you just get to ignore the Iron Hands, which is obviously really good. So I think it's weird because every deck theoretically has like a very good answer to just tech for the Lugia match. Not every deck, but most of the decks that I think people should be considering for NAIC, which we'll get to, I think can and should be teching for Lugia. But I don't think there's like really any deck in the format, at least that comes to mind, that just beats Lugia without having to play at least like one tech card, like in some way, right? So um it kind of makes it mixed, right? Because sure, if you're playing E-Hammer, you're probably beating Lugia with a lot of decks, right? But the fact that you have to play the E-Hammer still remains. So you're still respecting Lugia. So um, I don't think Lugia's not going to be as dominant as it has been, but it's definitely good. You should definitely respect it, and you should be scared of Lugia for sure.
Emma, thoughts on Lugia? Are you also bringing an E-hammer for the Legacy Energy if you for once play an attacking deck?
I'm not the biggest fan of those. Might be playing an E-hammer regardless. But in general, the testing I've done against Lugia is just that Lugia feels a lot better going first now. Before it was just you went first, you benched the Lugia, then a lot of the time it was attach pass. Now you actually have play on your first turn.
Mhm.
You really appreciated the read the win going second, but now you just free up so much of that clunk. So Carmine is just a very realistic consistency boost to it. It's still not classic consistency, but it got a boost.
Ian, anything to add on Lugia that hasn't been said yet?
So the biggest thing is actually probably about equal levels of like if it sets up power level of like Silver Tempest era Lugia, but the major issues it has is consistency. You just don't have as many ways to get Archeops and discard pile. That's the biggest issue. You just have Ultra Ball and Research. I guess like Serena and Carmine if you count, but not really. So your explosive draws aren't as reliant. And your second issue with the deck is that you run out of energy in some matchups where let's say just you have a normal draw, you may discard 2 or 3 energy just to set up. You might not have enough energy for Cincino to reliably knock out 2 to 3 Dragapult, so it does have problems even just with its own like gameplay and certain matchups that things don't go perfectly. But it's a deck where its ceiling is the highest ceiling of any deck in the format currently, and its floor still isn't all that bad if you get a respectable average-ish draw in most matchups. But also, I think that Christian also added earlier that there'll be stuff like Enhanced Hammer Game played more heavily and cards like Temple of Sinnoh, but I look at it more as respecting a strong deck, then you shouldn't play a deck because of it, if that makes sense.
So I want to very quickly go into some rapid strike questions about Lugia, just some very quick yes/no things. We're going to start with if you were playing Lugia, which, you know, for all of you that may be like, nah, it's not my deck. Doesn't matter. This is pretend you're playing Lugia. You're helping out someone, a friend who's going to play Lugia. Would you play? So Michael, we'll start with you and then we'll go in that same order. Simple yes or no. Would you play Wellspring Mask Ogre Pawn?
Yes.
Christian?
No.
Emma?
No.
Ian?
I mean, if you're setting up anyways, no.
All right, how about stadiums, 0, 1, or 2? And ideally, which ones would you play? Because we've seen Jamming Tower, we've seen Collapsed, we've seen Messagosa, so you got some options, right? Again, we'll start with Michael. Stadiums, and how many and which ones?
2, at least 1 jamming tower, but probably 1/1 jamming Messagosa.
Christian?
Ooh, I want to play 2, but realistically 1, definitely Gaming Tower.
Emma?
Yeah, I usually do. It's just so difficult to find when you only play one. And Jamming Tower is good.
And Ian?
Just 1 jamming tower.
And then the last major Lugia question, because it feels like everything else is very cookie cutter, is Carmine counts. Are you running? You know, we saw Azul put out a video with 4 Carmines. We saw a list win in Japan that played 0 Carmines. As always, the answer might be in between those. How many Carmines would you play in Lugia VSTAR? Michael, what do you think?
2.
Christian?
1.
Emma? Wait, what was that?
2.
And then Ian?
2.
Cool. And then last question about Lugia, but if you're playing against Lugia, so we already talked about the Wellspring Mask, and it was, 1 yes, 3 no's. But if you're playing against Lugia and you're playing a deck that runs Manaphy or is vulnerable to essentially Gmax Rapid Flow, would you bench Manaphy in game 1 without seeing the Wellspring Mask? Michael, yes, no, bench the Manaphy.
Yes.
Christian.
Deck dependent, but yes.
Emma.
Yes.
And Ian.
Yes. I think majority of players will definitely be playing it, even if I think it's bad.
That is always a thing, right? Like, am I teching for myself or am I teching for the other 2,900 people? The next deck I want to talk about is the one that Twitter decided was completely fraudulent for really no good reason. And then suddenly it gets second and third, or top 4, I guess, in Japan. That is, of course, Raging Bolt and Green Ogre Pawn. Teal Mask? Is that the... Okay, cool. That's the name.
That's right.
The Teal Mask Ogre Pawn. Again, people were like, no, this is just Roaring Moon all over again. But now it has the IRL results as well as the copious amounts of online results. I assume that's the right word, not English teacher. Christian, Raging Bolt Ogre Pawn. Is it real or is it going to be played in large numbers? Or is it somewhere in between?
It's definitely somewhere in between. I think it's probably like the best like pure big 2 prize beat stick deck because big damage, big basic, no boom, right? But
Mhm.
I feel like it's like a slightly more consistent Lugia with a worse matchup spread, if that makes sense. Because like Cincino still also does like big boom, right? But it's a 1 prizer, and you could play Legacy Energy on Luna, and you could do Iron Hand stuff, right? So, like, what does Raging Bolt do particularly better than Lugia? There's like a couple things, like your big basics have more HP, right? Bravery Charm on Giraffe is, still good damage, or not a good HP, I should say. Obviously, you have like super easy way to stream attackers, right? As long as you're drawing well. The deck is fundamentally solid, but it just like doesn't really have a place in the metagame, right? It loses to Gardevoir. We'll get on that. It really loses to Lugia. It doesn't like hard lose to Lugia, but even if you start with that 2/2/2 price trade, either like a Machine or Centino or like a Legacy Energy play can swing that. And you kind of have no real counter play to what your opponent's doing, at least in like the default Raging Bolt lists. So it's like, yeah, if you want to turn off your brain and just go bonk, bonk, bonk a bunch, then yeah, the deck's good. But if you want to do that, then why aren't we just playing?
Emma, what do you think? Bolt a fraud or real or in between?
I also think it's in between, but there are some factors that draw to it. It is the fastest deck in the format. It is consistent at doing it and testing. It's just attacking turn 1 most of the time, anyways. So my question is just like, do you want to play something that is fast and kills everything, or do you want to play something that's yellow and fast? Do get better.
Ian, what about you? Where's Bolt sit?
Real deck. I think it's better than it's being given credit for overall. It has high damage output, pretty consistent. You get to play Pokemon Catcher. Pokemon Catcher is a really good card right now. You can tech for matchups like Gardevoir with like stuff like Lost Vacuum. What do you mean? Pokemon Catcher is not a great card right now? Like,
No.
so many decks are vulnerable right now if you're getting all your bench Pokemon out, which is really difficult because the consistency cards in decks like Lugia are kind of bad. When you play no Nest Ball and you really have to rely on like Ultra Ball and Capturing Aroma to get out extra Pokemon, that's just not consistent. So Raging Bolt can take advantage of all these greedy deck lists running around, which are going to last into NAIC. Like, I really don't think that the greed levels of these decks are going to go down until after the event, when the decks that do best are all these very consistent, streamlined versions of every single version of every deck, really. So I think Raging Bolts is a pretty strong overall deck because there's nothing else you like. Personally, I'd rather play Lugia, but if you like Raging Bolt more, I see no reason not to play it. Just play a Lost Vacuum and maybe Enhanced Hammer, and you're good to go.
Christian, I'd be curious, why do you not think Pokemon Catcher is great? Half the time, it's a broken supporter on an item card. Like, that's good.
Okay, half the time it's undeniably a good card, but the other half of the time, It says flip a coin and put the card in your discard pile. This is probably just like a personal gripe on my end. I will not be flipping coins at NAIC. I don't want to deal with that. Same reason I won't be playing Lugia, of course. But no, like Pokemon Catcher is like probably good. I would just much rather play a consistency card or like another bot for that matter in that slot. More so because like even if you're playing Pokemon Catcher, you're probably not ever fitting more than two. I don't know how we're finding the space for that. And like Ian said, like you want to play cards like Vacuum and E-Hammer, and I think those are absolutely great techs in Raging Bolt. But at least in my lists, if we're playing Vacuum and E-Hammer, we are not finding space for Pokemon Catcher. I'd rather play cards that do something than a card that, in most cases, at least in my games, won't be doing anything.
And Michael, what do you think about Raging Bolt? Real or fraud?
I also think it's like somewhere in between. Like it's kind of comparable to Roaring Moon from like the end of the Paradox Rift format. Like you have a lot of like okay matchups and some like iffy matchups, but you just like you're just too aggressive and consistent, and like so a lot of decks struggle to deal with that. So like Guardy, for instance, back then, like sure you were very favorable into Moon, but like you were sort of forced to like stay on that prize trade and like not fall too far behind, or else you just lose.
Hmm.
So I think Raging Bolt does like something similar in this format.
Yeah, I want to point out for any listeners, because this is where the discourse can get weird, right? The internet is always saying it's Roaring Moon from LAIC meta, not the end of Paradox Rift with Michael just mentioned, which are very different decks in terms of success rate and everything. So it sounds like everyone's like, yeah, Bolt is a real deck, right? Are you looking for sleeves? Of course you are. You're a Pokemon trading card game player like me. I recently got my hands on the Procyon Gaming dual spec sleeves, and I gotta say, I absolutely love them. I was actually kind of surprised by how much I liked them. So we've now partnered with the Champions Reserve to offer you 15% off of Procyon Gaming's new dual spec sleeves. And maybe you're saying, Mello, why would you want to pick these ones? Because I think first and foremost, they are indestructible. I had played with the Sentinels, their old formula, and those things just did not ever get nicks on the corners or anything like that. And now I've used the dual specs, and I gotta say, they are also just the most indestructible sleeves that I have seen or used so far. After shuffling up dozens of games hands, they have zero bent corners. They are slightly larger than the Sentinel, so the cards fit in perfectly. And my absolute favorite, they come in boxes of 70, so you don't have a ton of extra sleeves. You have just enough if somehow one of them were to ever break, although boy, you got to be a rough shuffler to do that. So check out the championsreserve.com, use code LAKE15 for 15% off an order of. This podcast is sponsored by TC Evolutions. TC Evolutions offers the finest quality crafted damage counters, ability use markers, and VSTAR markers out there. So if you're looking to beat your opponents in style, be sure to check out tcevolutions.com and use code LAKE10 for 10% off your order. Anyway, back to the show. As such, we've seen an uptick of Gardevoir online, and we've just seen more and more Gardevoir, more and more success, more and more hype for the deck. We're starting on Emma on this one. Gardevoir. Is it that real? Is it actually going to see this play? Are people going to be scared off of a slow deck? Like, is Gardevoir going to see success? And is it going to actually see the level of play that we're expecting given how difficult it can be to play? Or am I wrong? Is it easy now? I haven't played it in this format. What do you think, Emma?
I think Gardy, in my opinion, is the best meta deck right now. It just gains so much. It gains Roxanne that you can Arven for. It gains being able to hit 330 without attaching a cape, and it gains more good matchups. So in my book, a deck that's already really good, that gains that much, has definite tier 1 potential. I would 100% respect it if I'm not even playing it.
Ian, what do you think about Gardy? Is it going to see the play rate that we're expecting given how difficult it is? Where are you thinking?
I think Gardevoir is very, 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 very good. That has a lot of utility. It has a solid engine. Refinement Curly is just a quite strong card. Monkey Dory is disgusting in this current format. It sets up a lot of perfect numbers with Gardevoir EX, where there's these situations like in the past, stuff like Future Hands could have been a bad matchup. Well, now you get to go Counter Catcher up Iron Crown, hit it for 190 for Guardy EX, and don't find an answer, knock out Monkey Dory, KO another 2-prizer, you just gain the lead, even though Iron Hands is theoretically supposed to be bad for you. It just has a lot of plays that is very good against this current new format, and it lost bad matchups like Pidgeot Control, where at the end of this previous format, that deck was one of the highest played decks at end of tournaments, and Gardevoir had a horrific time against it. So also Charizard, I think, going down in popularity helps a lot too, because even though it had a fine time against Charizard, that match was really coin flippy, and you had to play long games, so you could lose at the end after a 25-minute game one, and you just at best are tying the set.
I'm impressed you're getting a 25-minute game one with Gardevoir. I feel like every time I've played that, it's been 30 plus minutes easy. Michael, what do you think about Gardevoir?
Yeah, I agree. It's probably like the strongest deck in my opinion right now. I guess the one thing to point out is that like there are more exploitable weaknesses now. Like for example, the Monkey Dory, as like Dragapult or something, you could just target it down, and like the deck not falls apart, but like you have to recover it like really quickly, or else it becomes a problem. Also, like relying on the Monkey Dory and like only Bravery Charms to do damage means your damage cap is like a bit lower.
And then Christian, we haven't heard from you. Gardevoir. You're going to echo that it's the best of the top 3 meta decks?
That is exactly what I'm going to do, actually. I recently wrote a whole article on Gardevoir, a shorter one, but I have very, very positive opinions on Gardevoir right now. I think it's very good for a lot of the reasons everyone else has said. Right, Monkey Dory is super good. Unfair Stamp is broken. If you're playing Hyper Aroma, you're trolling because Unfair Stamp is the greatest card ever printed. Not that extreme, but I do think Unfair Stamp is insanely powerful. And one of the reasons Gardevoir, I think, like if Monkey Dory took Gardevoir from like a tier 2 deck to a tier 1 deck, right? Then I think Unfair Stamp is like that broken aspect that like the deck didn't have that before, right? Um, that like takes the deck from like, call it tier 1 to like a real BDIF contender. I'm not ready to call the deck BDIF. I think it's too early in the format to call any deck BDIF, but if you were to force me to call it BDIF right now, I would absolutely say Gardevoir. And again, just for like the same reason everyone else echoed, right? Screamtail, Countercatcher, Unfair Stamp, Airy, have fun, right? Like, what do you? There's no deck that can really respond to that except like maybe Zard, but like if you're playing Zard to NAIC, then you have to go through the hellscape that is all of the Lugias and Raging Bulls, right? And the Raging Bull isn't that bad of a form of a meta matchup words until they play Cornerstone. And yeah, I wouldn't feel good about playing Zard, especially if you're only playing Zard to beat Gardevoir. Gardevoir is just a fundamentally great deck with a great matchup spread right now. And it's my current pick for the tournament. I have no issues with saying that. I think Gardevoir is tournament was tomorrow. I'm playing 100%.
All right, so 4 for 4 of Guardy hype. So that's going to tell me you all probably have some opinions on some of the text. So let's do that same, no real explanation, just what would you play, a yes or no, or in the case of this one, which card? So let's go with the most controversial thing we've seen for Gardevoir, the ace spec of choice. Some of you already mentioned it, but I want you to say it again anyway. Emma starts off which ace spec you play in Guardy, if you play Guardy, of course.
Unfair Stamp. No question.
Ian.
Better Stamp, no Unfair Stamp.
Michael.
Stamp.
And then Christian?
Unfair Stamp.
I was not expecting the 4 for 4 there. All right. Next one is Flutter Mane. We've seen kind of in and out of lists. Emma, you playing Flutter Mane?
Yeah, it's just a really solid option.
Ian.
100%.
Michael.
Yeah.
And then Christian.
Absolutely.
And the last one that we've also seen go in and out of lists a little bit is Mimikyu. Emma, playing Mimikyu.
I don't think so.
Ian,
Currently, no.
Michael,
Also currently no.
and Christian.
You won't believe this. Currently, no. It is meta dependent though.
Are you all gonna same 60 Gardevoir? Like, what is this?
A lot of people will be.
All right. The next deck we have to talk about is what was the big bad as of 3 weeks ago, and apparently now it is. Yeah, that thing will show up probably. Dragapult. So we've seen some Dragapult lists. They're all over the place, right? Mahone tweeted out one that got like 1,000 likes, where it was just Charizard with the Dragapult in it. We've seen the Xatu builds are still seeing a fair amount of success. We've seen Lost Zone builds online have been seeing a very high percentage of success, given how played they are, right? They are rising a little bit, but it's usually lower. Ian, how real is Dragapult? Is it a fraud like Twitter said? And of course, the most important question, which variant or variants are the actual threats?
I think it's very much a real deck. The biggest thing is it's very easy to make a bad list for it, and it's a type of deck where if you have a bad list or your matchups get a lot worse, the biggest thing is people still are playing Xatu even just a little. Xatu is one of the worst cards ever printed as a support Pokemon. If you're playing Xatu in your deck, you're not going to do well. There's a reason why Spathra EX never had real success in the last format. I think the only partner I like personally is Pidgeot EX and maybe Charizard. I haven't really decided if I'm a big fan, but I really feel that Pidgeot EX has been one of the best cards in Standard for a while. And if you're playing a Stage 2 support deck, you're really just making a wrong choice if you're not playing the card in your deck.
The fact I want to use quick search was very important for my testing personally, and I assume several other people as well. Michael, Dragapult, is it a fraud? Is it real? And which variants?
I do think it's real, but I also agree with Ian that it is very easy to make a pretty bad list for it. I think Lost Dragapult is my go-to right now, just because it's Sablezard with like a Dragapult engine thrown in, and that solves the issues that both Sablezard and Dragapult had. Like with Sablezard, you have the issue of just like needing more switch cards because you don't have the Greninja to work with. So the Dragapult line like solves that. And then with Dragapult, you want an alternate attacker, and you also want like good energy acceleration, and then the Lost Zone engine solves that. So I think it makes the most sense for me in that respect.
Christian, what do you think about Dragapult?
Yeah, I think Dragapult's very solid. Definitely not like this like 0-0, nightmare deck that people are making out to be, but definitely solid. Xatu is a fraud, just like Ian said, that card's I mean the card itself is fine, but it just doesn't really do anything.
It's not.
I don't play Xatu. Every other Dragon Ball variant is like okay. Really not that big on Dragon Ball Pidgeot though. And that's mainly because I actually think the deck is very fragile inherently. You have no real counterplay to TMD Evolution. With Flareveil Charmeleon, you can't really play Mist Energy, right? Granted, TM Devo is not that popular right now, so you can probably get away with it for NIC. But if it ever became popular, it would just actually just throw in TM Devo and win, right? Neo Upper Energy is also a card that is very easy to exploit. Although granted, you really only need like the one use of it out of it per game as the Dragon Ball Pidgeot player. So I don't think Dragon Ball Pidgeot is like bad by any means, but I would personally rather be playing either Dragon Ball Charizard or Lost Zone Dragon Ball. And I do consider the two decks to be different decks, so I'll talk about them individually. I agree. I agree with Michael that Lost Zone Dragon Ball is very good. I think it's super good. I've actually been toying around with a list that played Arvins, which was surprisingly successful. It was like 4 colors, 3 Arvin, right? Kind of just meshing two decks together. But felt really great, right? You had definitely had some good setups with that, where you just get to have Humphreys on board, and you have a couple of Drag Cloaks, and you put a Dragon Ball EX inactive, and the deck just feels great, right? Getting to play Dragon Ball and Sableye in the same deck is just ridiculous as well. So that's super good. Definitely like the type of deck that needs more refinement to like really be a top tier threat though. I don't think we really know how to build it correctly yet. As for Dragapult Charizard, I think it's the best way to play just like pure Dragapult. Because I think we're underselling Dracloak as a draw engine. I know there's been a lot of talk about Dracloak not being a good enough draw engine, but I actually disagree with that quite heavily. And in worst case, I do think that can just play like a 1/1 barrel deck or 1/1 barrel line, or even like a 101 Pidgeot, like kind of isn't terrible. Then you probably play like a thinner Charizard line. I don't think we need these 2/1/2 Charizard lines. I actually think you're fine going even lower. And playing like a theoretical, like pure Dragapult deck, with like lesser counts of other stuff. It's more theoretical, in that sense, but I do think by playing less other stuff, you're actually making your deck less exploitable to a lot of the things that are trying to target Dragapult in this current format. And also Charizard's a good attack. But yeah, that's my current take on Dragapult. Although I'll admit I haven't put as much time into Dragapult as I have other things.
So, Emma, we will get to you, but I have to press Christian on something that you just said. So earlier, you were shoving E-Hammer into everything. And yet you just
Yes.
mentioned Neo Upper Energy as like you
Yes.
just need it once and you're fine. There's no real... Are you not afraid of people also shoving E-Hammer into everything, going E-Hammer plus Pokemon Catcher Heads or Boss, the other energy you have, and then just doing nothing forever? Is that not like a real fear with that deck?
No, it absolutely is, and that's why I meant to mention Neo Upper Energy as like a downside. Is
Okay.
you don't get to play a real A spec, which is terrible. And obviously E Hammer is a good card, right? So, and a very it's going to be a very widely played card as a result of Lugia seeing a lot of hype. So that's just another reason why I think that Dragapult Pidgeot is like kind of on fraud alert. I think Twitter's picking the wrong decks to put on fraud alert. Honestly, I think it's Dragapult Pidgeot, but we'll see what happens. I don't think any deck that plays Pidgeot can't be bad because Pidgeot's broken. But if I'm playing Pidgeot, I'm not playing it with Dragon.
Cool. And then, Ian, I want to give you a chance to defend it in a second, but Emma first. Dragapult, real, fraud, which variants?
I think it's gonna be real, but Dragapult Charizard is a real fraud, and Dragapult Star 2 barely exists in my mind. You to place Charizard, I mean to play Dragapult in this meta, you need to be able to stream Radzard. The hit points have gotten lower, and your deck is very vulnerable to things that can one-hit KO your free Dragapults. You just need to kill them with Radzard. That is the answer. And just generally, I don't love Dracloak as a draw engine. It's vulnerable to Iono in the late game, and it doesn't draw the specific cards you need. So personally, I think you need to play Comfies or Pidgeot or anything. But the list might be a bit more straightforward because as we speak, Ford is holding a master on Dragapult. And that has sold out as far as I'm aware. That might have a big impact on the NAIC meta.
I actually agree with that for
yeah,
sure.
I
I
was
was
gonna
going to bring that up, but I definitely agree with that for sure.
Did you read my notes, Emma? Because yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. But first, I want to give Ian a chance to. Do you want to defend Dragapult Pidgeot since you said it was the number one?
It's my current number one. I think the deck's kind of flimsy, like Christian was saying, so I don't really have much to add. I won't be playing Dragapult first event, and that's a big reason why. There's hasn't been a version that really sold me on the deck, so I mean, if you want to play, I think Pidgeot's the best way, but
Okay.
I don't really have anything else to add. Actually, I have one thing actually. Neo Upper, I think it is a good card. I think it's a good card. The matchups where it's like useful, you can just use like Mel the next turn because if they're just going E-Hammer attack, it's like that's fine for you. So you usually have like just Mela. So it's really just to what I found good is when like you have energy on board plus Neo Upper, so it guarantees that you're attacking the next turn. But if it's only energy in play, then yeah, you're in trouble. But you just need to make sure it's never the situation that you find yourself in with the deck.
And the last thing I want to get through everyone's opinions on what Emma just mentioned. Tord is holding a masterclass for Dragapult right now, and he made almost 10,000 USD on it, which is absolutely disgusting, or great. Whatever you want to pick on that. I'm actually a big fan of people making a full-time living off Pokemon. But anyway, do you expect this to make a difference in the percent of people playing Dragapult? And or do you expect it to make a difference in the lists that people are playing? Are you expecting a lot of people to come out of this class being like, this is my exact 60, I'm going to run it? Ian, we'll start with you. Do you expect more people to play it because of the class? And or do you expect them to just copy the list because why wouldn't you?
I think it's going to be not people. It's going to be about the same. Not going to change much. People like Dragapult, but the list, it'll definitely skyrocket up because it's going to be people that watched it, and it's gonna be everyone else who looks at the top 8 list, the next Limitless event tomorrow night, which will there's copy the 60, which is gonna be obviously towards.
Michael, what do you think? Is it going to increase the play of Dragapult, and is it going to increase the people playing that 60?
I feel like it's a bit too close to NAIC for like people to actually switch off of whatever they're playing. So I don't think it's going to increase it that much, but I do think people are just going to copy Tor's lists just because like it's Tord.
Christian, what are your thoughts on same 2 questions?
Yeah, basically the same as Ian, Mike, but I did actually comment. What's it called? I think you made like a Twitter post about this
Yeah.
as well. Basically the same question, and I'm just going to echo the opinion I did then. And that is that I do think that Dragapult will like theoretically go up, right, in the amount of players who are going to play it, but it's still going to like because the tournament's so big. The fact that it's going up in count is not going up enough to like really make an impact on the overall meta. However, I do agree that Tor's list is probably just going to be like the most played Dragapult list at the event, because a lot of people who have already decided that they're going to play Dragapult are going to play Dragapult, prepare Dragapult, then they're going to show up towards lesson, right? They're going to get the list. They're going to hear Tor talk about it, and then they're going to block that 60 and play Dragapult the rest of the week for NAIC, right? So definitely going to be the most played Dragapult 60, and I even goes so far as because a lot of people are going to get this list like in one way or another, right? Like someone's going to buy the lesson, spread it to the friend group, testing group, whatever, right? So I'd actually expect that we reach the point where whatever variant of Dragapult it ends up being like Tord says is like the best one, or like that's a 60 or whatever, right? I think that's going to be the most played version of Dragapult, and that's going to be super relevant as far as people's like testing and metagame prediction is for NAIC. So in that sense, it will have relevancy.
And Emma, same questions or same 2 questions. What do you think?
I think there's a lot of people in a position where they've tested a lot and they're like flip-flopping between Pult and either Raging Bulb or Lugia most of the time, and they're pretty uncertain going into an ASE. Most of those people will buy Pult's Masterclass or will have the VOD or something, and then Pult gets to do his pitch to convince him. And a lot of the time, it will probably work if the Masterclass is good. Yes. So I think it's going to have a pretty major impact on play rates, but in my eyes, major impact is 2, 3, 4%.
The next deck I want to talk about, we're going to zoom a little bit through this one. I'm not even going to ask you if it's good. I'm going to tell you that you think it's good, is Snorlax Stall. Because if you don't think it's good, but you are more than welcome to tell me that the deck is bad. But okay, Christian, you'll get that chance in a second. But if you think the deck is bad, that's great too. Do you think it's a deck you are okay taking a loss to? I think that's the real question that always comes up, because it's not played in that high of a percentage usually, even if it's good or not. So Michael will start off, I guess. Okay, I'm not going to tell you anymore because several of you disagreed. Is Snorlax Stall a good deck, and or are you fine taking a loss to it if the answer is yes? Michael, start us off.
I think it's like good, but there's still very like iffy matchups, especially if like Lugia is as popular as we think it is, and like same with Gardevoir. I still think it's okay to take a loss to it, just because like Snorlax has been in great positions to like do well in this format, like the last format, whatever, and like people haven't played it. It's still been like extremely low usage. So yeah, I think it's okay to not respect it.
Christian, Snorlax, is it a good deck, and would you respect it if it is?
No and no. It's so okay. Snorlax is effectively just signing up to play matchup roulette, which it's kind of always been, and that's fine in and of itself. But Pidgeot control is just fundamentally a better deck. If you have confidence in yourself as a player, I think you're better off playing Pidgeot control. Granted, I do think it's very risky to play Pidgeot control into an open meta like this, unless you're one of the best Pidgeot control players out there. Hi, Emma. So I can't ever really comfortably say that Snorlax is like a good meta call unless the meta is like tailor made for it, right? Stockholm was a good example of Snorlax being a good meta call, right? One of the few ones out there as far as I'm concerned. I mean, like Michael said, right? Lugia, obviously a terrible matchup unless something changed that I just don't know about. Gardevoir as well. Definitely not unwinnable by any means, but I don't think it's favored for block slacks. I actually think Monkey Dory makes it worse in a couple ways as well. Your Gardevoir EX becomes a much better attacker because now you Monkey Dory gets you tool cards, right? Not forever, it's not perfect. And you probably don't want to like actually bench Monkey Dory. Maybe I'm cooking a little too much with that one, but besides the point, Gardevoir is still probably beating block slacks, I think, in most cases. But regardless, it's just matchup roulette and like worse than Pidgeots. And I mean, if you want to gamble your NAIC on that, go ahead. But I won't be playing it. I won't be respecting it, and I won't be telling others to play
Emma,
it.
do you think it's a good deck, and/or would you respect Snorlax stall?
It's not a good deck. It's a meta call, and I have not respected the deck since Gdansk. We are going into a format where Snorlax has a sketch matchup at best into the top 3 decks. I don't like that. No. Don't respect it.
And Ian, same too.
Never respected it, and you're having bad Lugia matchups, so you should not be signing up for an event where Lugia is going to be one of the top 2 most played decks, and it will do very well, so you cannot really avoid it, even if you go far into the event.
And last question for everyone is going to be, what is the best deck to use Iron Hands? Let's say you see the Lugia at the top, you see the Guardy, and you're like, I want to play Iron Hands. Don't say Guardy beats Iron, it doesn't matter. If you want to play Iron Hands, what is the best non-Lugia Iron Hand decks to bring? Is it Miraidon? Is it Lost Zone? Is it Future Hands? I guess it just won the SPE, right? Christian, what do you say best Iron Hands deck?
I mean, it's gotta be like either Miraidon or Lost Box, right? I guess like fundamentally for different reasons. Miraidon being able to turn one hands and be a real deck outside of that is pretty good, right? I think the main thing is you have a very good Lugia matchup. If you are going like you're pretty consistently hitting these turn 1 attacks, sorry. With Miraidon, so like you can play like the 2/2/2 coin flip wars with Raging Bolt, right? Granted, you have to bust more than they do because the draft just has so much HP. So you're probably taking the bad Raging Bolt matchup. You're definitely beating Lugia, and you're definitely beating Gardevoir. I think it's like the only hands deck that can like actually realistically get to amp twice into Gardevoir. By the time Lost Zone gets to like amp, the Gardevoir player probably has a response, right? If they don't, fair play. But Miraidon can very realistically amp twice into Guardy. There's not a lot to like counter catch Screamtail shenanigans, right? On their bench, most things have one retreat. So like Miraidon's like probably the go-to there, but that means you're playing Miraidon, which is arguably a less consistent deck than Lugia, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe not quite. I'm probably biased there. I do not like Generator. I despise that card. But if you're trying to amp a lot because Lugia and Gardevoir are good, Miraidon's the way to do it. But Lost Zone is good and it plays Iron Hands, so like I guess that's an answer too.
Emma, what do you think is the best Iron Hands deck?
I think it's Lost Box. Lost Box is just, it's never been bad. It's never going to be bad. Comfy is broken, Colors is broken. But I think Miraidon might have some potential. It probably has a lower win rate, just the loophole method than Raging Bolt, but it has a much better Lugia matchup, which will be very relevant.
Ian, what is the best Iron Hands deck?
The one I like the most is Turbo Lost Zone, but the one I think is actually the best play is Miraidon. I think Miraidon is just a good deck. If you hit the non-Raging Bolt decks of the format, you'll do well.
Michael, what do you think is the best Iron Hands deck?
I was gonna say Turbo Lost Box, but I think I agree with Christian's logic that Miraidon, like everything that Miraidon has,
Right
except well, Generator. Generator sucks.
Have you considered hitting 2 energies off of it? It's pretty good.
No.
I appreciate all of your thoughts. I want to give you a chance to shout out anyone, sponsors. Where can people find you if they want to follow you? We'll go in that order from top left down. So, Ian, where can people find you? Any shout outs of sponsors, things like that?
First of all, shout out my sponsor, the Shuffle Squad. If you want to find me, my X is Ian__Robb. Yeah, that's really it.
Michael, what about you?
Yeah, I'm just on Twitter at OUPAS327. That's about it.
Christian, what about you?
Yeah, I'll make this longer than the others. You can find me on Twitter at StixPTCG, Twitter or X, whichever you prefer to use. Of course, shout out to Lost in Kitchen, 88 Card House, right? Appreciate the support from there. And I stream on Twitch, same handle as Twitter, same with Metafy. I do all the Pokemon player stuff, right? All those things. So if you're interested in anything I do, yeah, Twitter, coaching, Twitch, whatever, same handle, StixPTCG on everything. Go check me out. And if you find my content cool, dope. If you don't, then well, do it.
Emma, what about you?
If you want to find me, you can either go on Twitter at @LittlesisterLatus. Always appreciate control questions, so just in general, or you can just find me at events. I'm usually wearing a bright green dress and I have green hair. It's very easy to spot me.
Myself, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube at Mellow_Magikarp. If you still need cards for NAIC, be sure to go to tabletopvillage.com, select pickup right in the notes section. You want to pick up at NAIC and use code MELLOW5 so that I can get free cards with the commission. This has been another episode of the Lake of Rage podcast. We'll catch you all next week. Are you looking for some good Pokemon gear? Well, be sure to check out doomed-gaming.com to get some Lake of Rage merch. We have stickers, hoodies, and t-shirts. And the best part is the logo looks like just a generic Gen 2 Pokemon logo with the words Lake of Rage and the red Gyarados on it. I've been stopped a few times in public by people saying, hey, I like your Pokemon shirt. Johto was my favorite generation. So you can support the podcast and get some cool Pokemon merch at doomed-gaming.com and use code LAKE for 10% off your first order.